All right, well, so I want to start out today. I want to ask a question. How many of you need glasses or contacts to help you see well? Man, there's a lot of you out there that don't. Well, I am so jealous. I'm so jealous. I was in 6th grade when I found out I had to wear glasses. And 6th grade is not the time you want to have to start wearing glasses. So, I was sitting in a theater, kind of like this, and I was sitting in the back, and I was looking at the exit sign. And I realized all I saw was a red glow. I knew that it said exit, but I could not make out a single letter. And I was like, oh my gosh, this explains why my batting average has been suffering in softball, because I can't see the ball coming at me when it's coming that fast. So I figured that out. But my dad took me to get my eyes checked. It turned out I did need glasses. I really should have gotten them a lot sooner than I did, but I needed glasses, and I did not want to wear them. But when I did get them, I had this realization. I walked outside of the place we were at, and I looked at the trees, and I was like, there are actual individual leaves on the trees. And you don't think about that, but if you've ever gone out without your glasses on or anything, looked out, it just looks like a big green glob on a stick. And I was like, oh, these trees are beautiful. I can actually see the leaves on there. So as much as I didn't want to wear glasses, it brought me something that was the desire, 20/20 vision. That should be our goal. 20/20 vision should always be our goal. And those of us who have bad vision, we know that we can lack in clarity. Yeah. We can lack depth. We can actually lack truth in what we see, because we think we see one thing, and when reality, it's nothing like what we're envisioning, because we just can't really see it clearly. But so again, the goal is 20/20 vision. That's what we all should want. And when the optometrist is trying to give us our prescription, and they're moving those lenses one at a time in front of you, saying, which bit are 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're doing that because they're putting different magnifications. Right. Trying to find what gives you clarity, which brings us to 20/20. They're trying to get us that 20/20 vision goal. And so, I think it's really important that we think about that in terms of our lives too. We should be desiring 20/20 vision in our lives. And I just stopped and thought, these glasses here have no function other than fashion. The lenses have no prescription. But when Alyssa was younger, I had glasses. She wanted to wear glasses. And I said, you don't need glasses. You should be so excited you don't need glasses. But she wanted glasses. She wanted them for fashion. This was a fashion statement. So I could put them on, and I see nothing differently, because the lenses have no prescription. They are strictly for fashion. I know these don't look fashionable on me. They were not mine, but they have no prescription, and therefore really don't assist me with anything except maybe a little bit of fashion. Now, these are my glasses. They're, my goodness, probably 15 years old. I don't know. I haven't changed my prescription in so long. But right now, you guys look blurry because I have my contacts in and the glasses. So now it's not 20/20, but on a normal occasion, when I don't have my contacts in, these are what give me 20/20 vision. And so these are functional. These may not look as great, but in a world that wants to look great and do things with lenses that don't help them, this is what we really need. We need the ones that may look okay, but they really give us the goals that we need, that 20/20 vision. That's what we need. And so it's so important that we determine what lens we are looking at life through, because there's many options. We want 20/20 truth. We want to be able to look out and see the truth of God, the truth of our life, the truth of where we're going. That's what we need. Because there's so many other lenses that can distort that vision and give you a very distorted look of truth in your life. So, what lens are you looking through? That's what we're talking today about. We're talking about 20/20 vision. And I'm pulling from the book of Numbers in the Bible. Many of you are probably very familiar with the story of the 12 spies that Moses sends out into the promised land and tells them, go figure out what this place is like, because we're supposed to go in there and we want to know what we're up against. So Moses sends 12 spies, one from each of the tribes of Israel. And in Numbers 13, 17 through 20, we read, Moses gave the men these instructions as he sent them out to explore the land. Go north through the Negev into the hill country. See what the land is like and find out whether the people living there are strong or weak, few or many. See what kind of land they live in. Is it good or bad? Do their towns have walls? Are they unprotected like open camps? Is the soil fertile or poor? Are there many trees? Do your best to bring back samples of crops you see. It happened to be the season of harvesting of the first ripe grapes. So Moses is very specific. He's telling these 12 spies, go find out everything you can. We don't want to have anything held back because we have to know what we're up against. And so the spies go for 40 days of espionage. Okay, that's pretty cool. But when they come back, we see there's a division in the vision that is seen. We see 10 spies who have one vision of the promised land. 2 spies, that's Joshua and Caleb, have a very, very different vision of the promised land. And I like to look at that like one's nearsighted and one's farsighted. Like one can see up close really well, but not in the distance. And the farsighted people can see in the distance, but not up close so well. So knowing that all 12 spies went out and saw the same exact land, same exact thing, it appears they were obviously 2 groups of people looking through very different lenses. And what we learn from the 12 spies when they reported back is that they gave a bad report to the Israelites. But they appeared to be suffering from what I like to call yeah, but syndrome. So in Numbers 13, 27 to 29, it says, this was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it was indeed bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here's the kind of fruit it produces. It's a great place God has prepared for us. They see that. Yeah, but the people living there are powerful and their towns are large. And we even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and all along the Jordan Valley. It sounds impregnable. Yeah, right. They were terrified because of what they perceived in the size and the strength of the people who were living there, and as well as the size and the fortifications of their towns. They were terrified. They could only see what was right in front of them because they were nearsighted. They were looking through a lens of fear. Right. And when you're looking through a lens of fear, it's fueled by doubt and focused only on the problems. Right. And that's what they were doing. So even though the 10 spies saw the same thing that Joshua and Caleb did, in that it was a beautiful land of milk and honey, they still saw it through a different lens. Yeah. That lens of fear made them doubt God. It made their faith dwindle, and it made them face nothing but problems. Because when you focus on your problems, you forget the promises. That's right. So Joshua and Caleb, however, they saw something very different. In Numbers 13:30, we read that Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once and take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. And then the next chapter we read, they said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people in the land. They are only helpless prey. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. Man, the courage that Joshua and Caleb show is phenomenal because they were farsighted. They were farsighted. They were looking at a lens of the future, which was fueled on faith and focused on promises. That's right. When you can build your view on your faith and the promises that you know God has made, you can't go wrong. That's where you need to be. I think about it because Caleb and Joshua understood that this was the promised land, meaning it was promised by God to the Israelites. It even says when God told Moses to send the spies out, he literally used the words, it was to the land I am giving to the Israelites. If it's been given by God, why would you look at any other lens other than of the future? He's already given it to you. So the two of them looked through the lens of future, already envisioned the victory that they had ahead of them. Because when you focus on the promises, you forget about the problems. They didn't even see the giants. Well, they probably saw the giants. They probably saw the walled cities and the fortifications. But it didn't worry them because they were focused on the future, on their faith in God's promises. But there was another, but the other men who had explored the land with him, them disagreed. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought too. Like they knew. That's what they thought we looked like, grasshoppers too. Very foolish. But again, they're seeing through the lens of fear, not the lens of their future based on faith. And remember, the Israelites had just lived through a time when God was physically with them day in, day out. He led them out of Egypt, out of slavery. He led them by day in a pillar of smoke and by night a pillar of fire until they got to the Red Sea. And then he parted the Red Sea so they could escape the soldiers coming after them from Egypt. They were in the midst of God. They saw his miracles day in and day out, and yet they still chose a lens of fear when it came down to this moment. They used the lens of fear, not trusting God. You know, the Israelites chose the side of the 10, the majority, and chose to look through the lens of fear. And it was so bad that they even called to stone Caleb and Joshua. They wanted to put them to death so they could quiet their side of the story and just go on with what the majority had agreed on. So were there repercussions for this lack of faith? Using the lens of fear? Absolutely. God was furious. This is what sends them into the wilderness for 40 years. He said, you are nowhere ready to come into the land I've promised you. You are faithless. You're a faithless people. So for 40 years, they're condemned to wandering around in the wilderness. And he says, none of you of this generation will enter the land that I've promised. That means he was speaking specifically to the men 20 years and older. None of them would enter the promised land because of their lack of faith. There was only one exception, well, two exceptions. That was Joshua and Caleb. God speaks them out specifically and says they are different. They look at the lens of future. They are faithful, and they will enter the promised land because they wholeheartedly have chased after me. So that's the whole setup of this story of the 12 spies. So what can we learn from Caleb and Joshua about 2020 vision and how we can also have that 2020 vision based on future? The first thing we notice about Caleb and Joshua is they are ready. Yeah. Simple. Numbers 13:30 says, let's go at once and take the land. He said, we can certainly conquer it. Can you see how aggressive they are? Caleb's like, let's go. We don't have to get anything. We don't have to get supplies. We don't have to do anything. Let's go right now. We are assured victory because God is with us. Right. God has already set it out ahead of us. He's already given it to us. They were ready to go. They were always ready, and they did not need to prepare. God's presence was all the preparation they needed. Yes. You know, it makes me stop and think about when Anchor Church first had to move to this location. Many of you might have been in Advent with us that last week when we were there, and we knew we had to move. We had to be out by the end of the week, and we had no location to tell anybody where to go to. So we knew we were trying to get this location, but we didn't have a signed lease yet. We didn't have keys, and they didn't want us to announce to a church full of people to come here if we weren't going to get it. So that last Sunday, we just told everybody, we have something planned ahead of us that God has put in our hands. We are trusting in that, and we are ready to move when he's ready to move. So we just faithfully packed up the church after service that day into a U-Haul. Everything we had was in the U-Haul parked in that church parking lot until we heard that we got the signed lease, and we got the keys on Thursday afternoon. Church is on Sunday, mind you, 2.5 days later. And we thought, God, we're ready. You called us to this. You prepared this for us. We're ready. So we called out to the folks, some of you in this room, and said, we're ready. And you showed up here. You didn't even know where you were going at that point, but you showed up here and built a stage. And you built the production booth back there. And we cleaned the church, and we got rooms ready for youth, and we got everything unloaded out of the trucks in a matter of 2.5 days. So God could meet us here as we opened this church that following Sunday. And it really was only because we were ready. Yeah. Because we knew God had this for us. So we had to be ready when he called, and we just made sure we were ready. You all helped with that too. That was such an amazing time when we got this together in 2.5 days. So we should always stand ready. You never know when God's going to call you into the next step he has for you, into the future that he has for you. So we all have to stand ready. Just have that heart that is ready for whatever he puts in front of you. Take that step. Okay, so Joshua and Caleb, they were ready for one. They also remembered. In Numbers 14:11, we hear, and the Lord says to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? Will they never believe me, even after all the miraculous signs I've done among them? So sad. You know, like I said, they had been living with God in their presence. His presence was present with them. And so for them not to remember all that he'd done for them, Caleb and Joshua, they were different. It even says they had a different attitude. It's what says in the scripture than the Israelites. They remembered God taking them out of Egypt, God staying with them as they went through the desert, God opening the waterways so they could walk across the sea with soldiers coming down after them. They recognized that the presence of God in any battle was a victory. And so they knew they could rely back on that. They remembered, because we have to remember our history with God's faithfulness. That's what builds our faith. Our faith is built on his faithfulness. So the more we remember, the more our faith is built and upheld as we face trials. You know, many of you know that I almost died last November after a weird seizure episode thing. No one even knows what it really was at this point still. So I went through a really rough patch for a month. And I can look back at that. I can't think about it because I don't know what happened during that month. I have no recollection of anything that happened. But I can look back at that incident and remember how God was faithful through the whole thing. The whole thing. It was the craziest time for church. Christmas, Thanksgiving, all these things we're doing, so many moving parts. And Sean and the staff were trying to take care of me and trying to make sure church ran. It was such a juggling act. It was so amazing. When I look back and I remember God's faithfulness through that whole time to our church, but not just to our church, to me. I could have easily been dead at that point. I could have easily come out of that and needed hospital care for the rest of my life. No one knew what that would look like. But God has been so faithful, and I can look back on that and remember. It's not even that long ago. I can remember that. And then just a few months after that, I was still having weird tingling sensations in my hands since I had come out of that seizure. They were constant, and they were just, I felt like I couldn't touch things, I couldn't feel things right, and it was annoying, but the doctor told me it might be there for the rest of my life, and I said, okay. But one day, I asked Sean to anoint me with the oil, we were at the house, and our family gathered around us and we prayed. And I haven't told many people this story because I don't know, it just sounds exaggerated, but it's not. This is exactly what happened. Sean anointed with me with oil. The family prayed, and while they were praying over me, I was praying very specifically, Lord, let me know you're here. Take this tingling away. Take it away from me permanently. And my hands were going crazy. They were just tingling, and I'm standing there, we're praying, and we stopped, and they're still tingling. I was like, okay, God, maybe this wasn't the time. So we walked from the doorway where we were and walked into the kitchen, and as I walked into the threshold of the kitchen, I could feel it. It was gone. It was gone permanently. My hands have not tingled since that day when Sean anointed me with oil and I prayed. And I don't know too many personal healing stories like that, so I hesitate to share that, but God is so good. I need to share that because I can remember now. I can remember he took me essentially from a grave and raised me from that, and then answered my prayer again, taking away something like that. And then this whole remembering thing, it's an ongoing process because it's so easy for fear to ever creep back in. Just this week, Wednesday, I was sick. I don't know what it was, flu, something. My whole body ached so bad. My head was full and my voice was gone and I had temperature. I didn't know what it was. I have not felt this bad as long as I can remember. But I came to work and started to panic. Fear started setting in. I literally felt like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the whole same episode again from November. And that was able to creep into my spirit. And I could feel the panic starting to come in. And Sean had to step up and say, this looks nothing like what it looked like the last time. You're sick, you've got some kind of sickness, cold, but this is not that. Don't even go there. And I could remember back, God was there, he healed me. He's not bringing me back through that thing. And he's got something bigger and better for me. That's why he is leading me in this way. So I was able to, I literally laid on our office floor, trying to take a little bit of rest or something, and my body ached so bad I could not sleep. So I just prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. I said, God, take this away. Heal me, take this away. And about an hour later, I was laying there, and I was still praying, and I thought, my body doesn't hurt. And those body aches were serious body aches. I'm telling you, I can't even explain them. I was in pain, and I was like, I don't hurt. So I took my temperature. My temperature was gone. And then I realized that it had been at least an hour at this point from the time I had what we're being told are little mini seizures. I'd been having them periodically. My neurologist told us, I think you might be having little seizures, and just don't worry about it unless I get more frequent. Well, they started getting really frequent, and then the day I was sick on Wednesday, I had already had 12 of them before the middle part of the day, and they're just unnerving. And every time I have one, it brings a little bit of fear, just because it's out of the blue, and I'm like, oh, I might have been talking to you guys in the past couple weeks or something in the lobby, and I might go, well, that was probably when I was like, I just had one, but it didn't make me lose consciousness or anything. It just would catch me off guard, and it's just a shocking, weird feeling that I would get. But that day I had 12 already. And as I laid there after praying, I realized it's been a whole hour. I haven't gone a whole hour today without one of those. And so I got up, I brushed myself off because I was thinking, I feel pretty decent right now. And I was feeling horrible before. So I just went about the rest of my day. We got home, we had dinner. And about 14 hours later, I realized I have not had a single seizure in this time. I did not ask God to heal me of that in that moment. I had asked him many times in the times leading up to that, days leading up to that, but I had not asked him to heal me of that. So I was just taken aback when I thought, oh my goodness, he just went above and beyond. I found out later that my daughter, who was praying for me and had her prayer team praying for me, her young adults pastor's wife prayed specifically, don't let her have those seizures anymore. That's really good to hear after the fact. Now, I have had a few of them, but they're so infrequent and they are so mild. The first one I had, I was like, did I just have one of those? I really had to second guess. But I'm saying this all to say that remembering God's faithfulness gives you faith to pray harder. I lost my faith on Wednesday. I will say I was scared. But Sean helped me focus back on that lens of future based on faith and his faithfulness. I was able to regroup and refocus. And I think he healed me. Okay, so we need to be ready. We need to remember, but we also need to be relentless, like Caleb and Joshua were. Numbers 14:10. But the whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. Okay, so now they're facing death. Are they going to stand on what they're saying? This is truly what we saw. Don't follow the majority, follow the truth. They stood on it. There was no backing down. This is what we saw. This is what the Lord has promised us. We're standing on that. They could have caved, and they didn't. But it is faith that advances the kingdom, not fear. And they knew that. So they stood faithful to their faithful God. And meanwhile, the entire Israelite group decides to follow the others. And isn't it funny what we can be relentless about? They were relentless after God. They were relentless after what his promises were for their entire nation. Some of us, I get nervous when we get bad weather on a Sunday because I'm always thinking, people aren't going to come to church. You can be relentless in going to work. You'll go to work through a storm. You'll maybe go on a date on a storm. But a lot of people just not that relentless with God. And I feel like I'm being called today to tell us this should be your priority. God has got to be your priority. He is relentless. We need to be relentless like he is. Jesus is the best example of relentlessness. He went to the cross, carried our sins, and there was no turning back for him. And that's how we should feel as we look at him. We are relentless for you. I think back to the starting of this church. You want to talk about relentless. We had an old couple trying to start a church with a bunch of young people who had no experience, and we're just going for it. We had no money. We didn't know what to do. We just knew we were called. And we're going to relentlessly pursue what God has put on our hearts. And we did with very, very little, and then COVID comes 6 months in. Young church, we didn't know what to do. No one knew what to do in the world. No one had done a pandemic before. So it was a scary time, but we buckled down. We turned our living room into a studio. We were blessed by 2 cameras. God came through in COVID and got us cameras so we could videotape services, and they went out. And they saved our church, and we grew through the pandemic until we were able to get into a building. That is the relentlessness that God's looking for from us. And the good news is that Joshua and Caleb, they went above and beyond. They were so wholeheartedly after God's heart, and they were rewarded for that. That's not why they did it. They didn't follow God because they wanted a reward, but they were so resolute that the reward came. Not only did Joshua get to go into the promised land and Caleb, he actually leads the Israelites into the promised land. He takes over for Moses when Moses dies. Moses doesn't go into the promised land. He leads the Israelites in. He's the leader of the Israelites then. And Caleb goes on to be a great landowner and a leader amongst the people, gets a great inheritance of land. But the other 10, what happened to them? They died before they entered the promised land. The time they went in and spied was the only time they got to see the promised land. They would never enter it again when it was theirs. Very sad. What killed them? They were looking through the wrong lens. The lens of fear. It will destroy your faith. And it actually killed them. So you may think it seems strange that God would test the spies. He'd already given the land to them. Why did he have to test them? Just let them go in. You know, God had just been dealing with the Israelites and had seen how wishy-washy they could be with their faith. They'd follow other gods, and then they'd come back to God, and then they'd follow other gods. And he knew he was sending them into a country, a land that was filled with other gods, other nations. And he knew he had to know they were faithful. They honored him. They loved him. And so he did test them. It's in the testing that faith is revealed. Right. That's where it shows. That's where it shows. And so, you can't show what you know that you've learned in class until you take the test. Put it down on paper. Show me what you learned. Show me what you've learned. But I've also heard it said that faith that can't be tested can't be trusted. That's right. And that's where God had to be sitting. I need to test your faith. I need to make sure I can trust you to send you into this land that I've prepared for you. I want you in there, but you have to be faithful to me. So, unfortunately, they did not pass the test. The 10 spies did not pass that test because of the lens of fear. In 1 Peter 1:7, it says, these trials will show you that your faith is genuine. Trials will show you that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. So do not despise the trials. The trials help us find our faith, help us see our faith, identify our faith, and maybe identify areas where we're maybe lacking a little in faith, where we know we need to build that. Because our goal is to pass the test the way Caleb and Joshua did. We want to pass the test with 20/20 vision, looking on the future that God has created for us, and with remembering all that he's done for us. His faithfulness builds our faith. It makes me think of a story of when my daughter Alyssa was 1 year old. She was diagnosed with bladder reflux, really bad, a case of bladder reflux, and she had to do oral antibiotics for the first 7 years of her life, every single day. And she didn't outgrow it, so they finally at 7 said she needed surgery. Terrified me. I was living in fear, for sure. She did go through with the surgery. It was successful, and when we went for the follow-up appointment, we had a different doctor who we'd never seen before. And so she did the ultrasound, and she said, Alyssa's kidneys look beautiful. And me, living in fear and looking at the problems, said, oh, except for the scarring on the one kidney, right? And she said, no, I don't see any scarring. I said, I saw the films. I know there's scarring on her kidneys. You can't heal a kidney. They told us. She will never have a fully functioning kidney on this side because of the scarring was extensive. And I said, I know there's scarring. And she said, she has 2 perfect kidneys. And I say that because the faith of a little girl who has heard the stories and knows to remember what Jesus can do. At 7 years old, said, Jesus healed me. And me and my fear and looking at the problems, boy, that magnified that for me in that moment. I thought, how did I not see that? Why didn't I view that lens? And it just makes you stop and think. We need to be ready. We need to be remembering. We need to be relentless so that when those moments come, we don't fail the test. We view through the lens of the future, relying on God, knowing his faithfulness will get us there. Thank you. Oh. Wow. There may be some of you out there that are thinking, I would really love to build a life of faith on God's faithfulness. But maybe you've never been to a place where you've actually accepted Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. And that's where it starts. That's where it starts. Get to know Jesus. Yeah. Let him into your heart, and he will help you build that life of 2020 vision.